What's up guys, Science Student here, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be unboxing the Dead Air Nomad L. So Dead Air, very familiar company probably to anyone who has spent any time in the suppressor industry or just the community in general. They tend to have a very good reputation, and it's for the most part very well deserved. There's some great people working at Dead Air, and that's a big deal. Big shout out to Todd McGee, one of the head engineers there, actually the head engineer there. Always very helpful and has been very friendly with me for some time. So I do want to say thank you for that. So Nomad L, we're going to unbox it here. If you've seen any of my Instagram live streams before this video came out, you've probably already know I got this. But long story short, I want to give you a little bit of back story to this. Why did I pick the Nomad L? Back when I ordered this, would have been sometime in like July, the two quietest 30 caliber 308 tested cans. Now when we say 308, we're talking about, like on a bolt gun, were at that point in time the Hyperion and the Dead Air Nomad L. Since the Nomad L has come out, there's actually now a third can. That would be the Diligent Defense Enticer L. And it does beat this by length, weight, width, price, and suppression. Okay, so, and I mean that by at ear, as well as back pressure too. But we can go over the Enticer a lot more in another point. But the reason I bring this up is as I wanted to choose a rifle silencer, a Form 4 rifle silencer, that if we got anywhere close to it and or ever beat it, we would know we have just a stellar product. So that is why I kind of wanted to swing for the fence right out the gate. So it's a great can. There's no doubt about that at all. We open it up. Now, it's fairly simple for the most part of what it comes with. It's more or less just the suppressor itself. Has its basic end cap. Dead Air is big on their flash cap, like we have one here. So that's definitely something you're going to probably end up wanting to upgrade, as well as if you do decide you want an e-brake, they have their e-brake as well. But anyway, it just comes the can itself. You do have this 5/8 by 24 threaded direct thread mount. So if you do have a direct thread rifle, well, I mean, everyone technically does, but unless you have no muzzle device at all. But you are at least able to attach it to that out of the box. Now, no quick disconnect system or anything. Dead Air is known for their Chemo and their Xeno. Xeno, I tend to think as second, third best system out there. Chemo, I'm not a huge fan of, and I've got my reasons why. I've talked a little bit about it in a previous video on Chemo, but you can go check that out on the Patreon. It's in the mounts and muzzle device section. As far as anything else, looks like we might have a sticker here at the bottom, but that's basically gonna be, yeah, we got a sticker at the bottom. It's basically gonna be it. Now, as far as price goes on these, they're fairly budget friendly. Nothing too crazy. I want to say anywhere from about $850 to $900, depending, where you find it and things of that nature. Now, they do make a titanium version as well. This will be all 17.4. The titanium version is not the same. Okay, it is not going to be as quiet. Some of the porting schemes in here are a little bit different. Not a ton of concrete info on every little change, but they are different. And the 17.4 can is definitely the quieter can. If you don't believe me, you can go check it out, the data on Pew Science. Now, right off the bat, this is going to be basically 1375. It's actually a little bit under that. You're going to have it necked down for ASR Bravo threads, 375 by 24 standard, threads for everyone out there. You can call it lots of different things. You can call it ASR Bravo. You can call it the hub. You can call it whatever. All the baffles are basically the same except for the blast baffle. The blast baffle is a little bit different. You've got roughly about a 2-inch blast chamber. We're going to look at modeling on all of this here. I've modeled it up to about as best as I can without cutting the thing open. Luckily, I've had some friends who've had some of these blow apart, so we do have access to some dimensions and stuff. And that kind of brings me to, I guess, one other thing I hate to have to say, but and you have to understand, Dead Air is a large company. They're making a ton of cans. They have a lot of contractors who are making parts and doing and assembling cans for them. And a bad weld happens and your can, it might come apart, and they'll warranty it and all that, but it does happen. A few of them will sometimes come out of round. They'll look a little wobbly if they were spinning on, let's say, in your lathe or whatever. This one in particular, we've got a little bit of a weird surface finish going on here on one of the cones, but I mean, for the most part so far, aesthetically, it looks fine. I chose the raw finish because I figured I would get it coated in whatever I wanted to actually get it coated in, as opposed to just getting it in black. I've got enough black cans and I've got enough raw cans already. But raw at least leaves me the easy option without having to do too much to, have it change to something else in the future if I want. So that is the Dead Air Nomad L. Pretty long. It's advertised as 8.4 inches, and it looks like we're just right about there. Now that's not going to include the mount. If you were to turn around and add something like chemo or anything like that, you're going to be adding anywhere from about 3/4 of an inch to even a full inch, depending on the mount. You can use things like the Reardon Atlas. That's going to add about 1/2 of an inch, so a lot more compact. What else can we talk about? I mean, we can get the weight. It's not going to be light. It's got a lot of cones, so it's got a lot of diameter. And you might think even going from like a 1625 to a 175 doesn't add that much weight. It really does actually. But you can look at we've got a welded baffle section, welded to a blast chamber section. So our first baffle sits roughly about right in here. And then we've got another one. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then on the end, it gets a little confusing because you have to weld on an adapter to then put the end cap. Okay, so it's actually 9 baffles. You might think it's 10, but it is 9. Very similar to a lot of the cans I like to build for this length, about 9 baffles. So we got that in common at least. It does use a serviceable end cap. I did not see it come with an end cap tool, at least in mine. I don't know if that was just me. Maybe I dropped it or something when I unboxed it. I didn't see it though. But I've got one somewhere. I just don't know where. It doesn't really matter because we're not going to pull the cap off. We're going to model this instead. But you do just have a little cap that goes into these little holes and allows you to spin it. I took it off earlier actually with a pair of pliers. Just stuck a little pair of needle nose in each corner because I couldn't find my cap tool and I wanted to look. But yeah, once you switch to the flash cap though, you can just stick something in between the prongs and see, how that works. But here is the Mad Shrimp, by the way. If you wanted to see kind of how they both look, they are very, very similar as far as aesthetics go. Obviously, what's inside, though, is completely different. And L's going to be just a little bit longer as well. Actually, Mad's going to be a little bit longer. I'm sorry. Mad's in the back. All right, so that sums up what we need to know. The last thing I would assume is probably a weight reading. Their website is going to say, I believe, 18.8 ounces. We'll see if there's truth to that or not. I don't know if it includes the cap. I don't know if that includes the mount. We'll see if this is too heavy for the scale or not. So we're 17 3/3 of an ounce there. So adding in the mount should probably get us to their advertised. Assuming I can get this on there without, yep, we're gonna go over. So we're gonna have to do a little math here. So 17.03 plus their direct thread mount is going to add 1.613. So yeah, we're very, very close, if not exactly, to what is advertised. Now, something like chemo is going to be add quite a bit more weight. I might even have a chemo sitting here if you guys want to hold on just a second. So chemo with a muzzle device is another 8 ounces. So that's almost the entire weight of something like a Resilient Suppressor's RSP, for example. Pistol can with booster, with piston and everything, weighs about 8 ounces. So it's a pretty heavy mounting system. Reared in Atlas with, say, a single port brake. It comes in at half of the weight, as well as not nearly the length. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a background there. So all right, let's go ahead and head on over to CAD and look at some modeling. All right, I figured it'd be worth a look at Dead Air's website real quick to get some specs and things like warranty and stuff. And then we're going to look at some cutaways, assuming I can get this typed. So deadAirSilencers.com wants to load here. We'll take a look. So they've got about a $1,000 price tag as MSRP. You can tend to find it a little bit cheaper than this. We don't need to subscribe. You can go and read their little spiel here. Mostly just going to be marketing. And we'll just keep scrolling down, and there we've got our specifications. So I'm not 100% sure what they mean by that energy rating. I'm assuming they're talking about maybe hoop stress or something like that, or how energetic of a cartridge, or I'm not sure. You guys probably might even know more than I do. Now, it is technically rated up to 300 normal mag. I can tell you 300 PRC. Liberty managed to blow one apart, but again, that could have just been a faulty weld. And if it does happen, well, it's absolutely positively warranted. So no huge deal there. Turnaround time's not too bad. That's one of the things Dead Air is known for, is the exceptional quality of their warranty. And if you do have issues with, say, the shop coming out and saying, this isn't warranty, you can always get a hold of other people at Dead Air. It does happen. Not everyone is always on the same page in any business, so it can happen. Again, it's L17.4. You can see the weight. This is what I was talking about with the diameter. It's 1735 technically, so a little bit under. You're not going to be able to tell the difference, though, by eye going from 175 to 1735. So get that right out of your head. They do consider it full auto rated, and they do have no barrel restrictions. Now, what does that mean? A big stickler for this kind of rating. It basically means that they're willing to warranty it, if you destroy it. I mean, that's what it comes down to. They're not saying it'll actually hold up to you throwing it on a 4-inch belt-fed 5.56 and burning a 200-300 round belt through it. They're just saying that if you did it, they would warranty it. That's basically what that means. Now, it's not to say this can in any way couldn't potentially handle that, but we all, I think, know some of the limitations of construction in any can, and heat is a big killer, and, everything's different. Now, 17.4 as well. It depends on the design of the cone and such, the temper of the cone, the relationship of the cone to the muzzle exit event, whether we're using a muzzle device, a flash hider, nothing at all. A lot of factors can play into blast baffle wear as well. So, but the great news is Dead Air is going to warranty it. So that's pretty cool, and that is one of the reasons why they have such an exceptional, I guess you could call it reputation, right? So there have been no shortage of different models of the Nomad and different lengths and different small little changes here and there in its little life that we've all been able to track if you follow it closely. Here someone has taken an Xray of a much shorter, probably a Nomad, just the regular 30 more than likely. But they all basically share many of the same features, just some refinements over time. You're going to see the blast baffle kind of is a 3-angle pocket cone. And then you're going to see kind of more of like a dual, it's also technically a 3-angle cone. After that, you're going to see that we've got a coaxial or annular area. So there's going to be little bits of porting scheme. It's a very unique porting scheme. There's actually a notch in the tops of the cones in only one location that then allows gas to get into the annular area. And then there's a little hole in some of the cones that then the gas can get right back out and back into the main axial area. So this just kind of gives you a little bit of background before we move on. And here we have a much more detailed look because now we have one actually cut away. So if I can get you kind of to focus here on this area, this is going to be the blast chamber area. You're going to see down here at the bottom the notch in the hat here. So imagine the two had continued up to here. So gas is going to only be able to go through this notch or the bore. All right, and the clip is right here. And then it's going to then get into this area here where eventually, depending on the porting scheme, okay, will either have nowhere else to go, or they put a small hole inside here, and then it can then vent back in this area where it will then do its thing all over again. So the porting is one of the main things that over time they've kind of made small adjustments to, especially if it's the shorter, longer, tie, Gen 1, Gen 2, etc., etc., etc. While all this isn't really like a published thing where you can like go read about it, you do have to kind of pick it up over time through conversations and just looking at things, kind of this nature. You can make a lot of informed opinions. And Todd has typically been pretty open to people about his designs. All right, so here we have a look at what is more than likely a titanium version. You'll see this is the end cap right here. You're going to see that the last cone on this one is ported. We aren't able to see if the second to last is ported or not. I can tell you this. On the L, there is no port here on the last cone. I would probably guess that there's probably not a port on maybe even the last 2 to 3 cones, potentially. But anyway, this is kind of what I'm talking about again, as they've over time kind of tried to figure out, what works and what does not. You do get another little bit of a closer look at the cone shape and structure, as well as these annular coaxial areas, whatever you want to call them. So again, these are going to be the areas that are pressurizing and then able to vent out of this little port here. Now you'll notice this port is in direct relation to our clip directly beneath it, where our notch is going to be, I believe, 180 degrees to this port, from the pictures I have seen and the deductions I've been able to induce. And this is one of the last cutaways we're going to be looking at. You're going to again see we've got our pocket cone here, and then our coaxial cones after that. And you'll be able to kind of notice the differences a little bit in design here. But now we can go ahead and transition over to our CAD model, where I've tried to at least get the high points modeled as best as possible. Okay, so here's a little bit of a better look at what we're dealing with. Like I said, we've got one angle here We've got like another angle here, and then we've got a pretty shallow angle over here. So it is technically 3 angles, and then we have a shouldered flat. Now this shoulder over here is going to be where there is a notch cut into one of the cones. I'll try to go ahead and throw photos up of the actual cones outside of the suppressor as we go, as I do have some additional stuff than what just those cutaways we were looking at are. But you basically get the idea. It's really not that complicated. It kind of looks a little bit more complicated just because of everything welded together. But just imagine even if this was a tube can, for example. You would just have these cones in this tube, and there would be no, well, this left one's not really working out for me here, but there would be no gap between the edge here and the tube, right, if we were using a tube can. So at one spot, if this was a circle around, you know, the baffle went around, we would then have to have a notch cut in for the gas to kind of go through to then enter this side area. So hopefully that makes sense. We've got these chambers here, which then can also, what? I mean, if the notch is here, gas can then flow in here, but it can also what? It can flow all the way around to the other side as well. And eventually, you know, at some point, some of the cones will have this waste port, which will then be able to vent out into the next cone in the stack. Now, everything is single clipped. I originally had this drawn up as a square clip, but I just went ahead and threw a little bit of roundedness in there to kind of give you guys the point. The clips are actually pretty small. I was only able to measure the blast baffle clip, so I can't tell you if all of them are the same. It was a bit tough to get in there, but the dimensions I basically came up with was a width of about 260, 265-ish, 270, somewhere in there. You can't exactly get the calipers down there in the blast chamber, so I kind of had to use pins and then kind of see what sort of fit. So a fairly wide clip. But as far as the depth goes, surprisingly shallow. If we're going to have to, yeah, I lost my middle here, but if we draw a line there to find our middle, and then we do a line from here to here, that's our 0 mark. So our depth was about 185. Now, these cones are not that tall, so that's also going to be one of the reasons why we're not going to have a super deep clip. So it's my theory that they, you know, because they were not able to really go with something too crazy on the deep side, that they then would substitute to a little bit wider. The clip's theoretical gas flow would be something like this. If we imagine this clip being the base over here, you can see we've got plenty of room for it to get under this side spot here. And if you can kind of imagine this cone being directly underneath another cone, it'll easily clear the face of the next cone. So this is the rough model I basically drew up or came up with. Again, I left the clip square cut in here because I was more just about representing the dimensions than perfect visual accuracy or whatever, but I think you get the point. You can really see the definition of how the blast baffle is different. It lacks the coaxial area. It's more of a traditional pocket cone, sort of similar to kind of like a Sauce 50, something of that nature, though not nearly anywhere near as tall and quite a bit wider. But you got some of those similarities, at least with the pocket. After that, you've got a lot of distal because of the nature of how the coax area or annular area is on the last cone welded in. So this is where you're going to have that one weld there, and then here's where you're going to have that other weird weld there on the back to get into the piece that then has the spot where your actual removable end cap would be. So I tried to kind of just do a very basic representation of what that would look like. Blast chamber's fairly small on this. It's not huge. It's not tiny. It kind of depends where you want to measure from. If you measure from the end of the can to like the base of the cone, you're about 2.16-ish, 2.15. You know, let's just call it 2.2. Let's be generous here. But you don't have a ton of room from the end of the can to the tip of your first cone, for example. Tip of your first cone is going to be about right there. And that's only about 1.5, 1.6-ish of space. So where if you use a chemo or a xeno, some of that is going to give you some backward volume over here in this area. Chemo is about 1/10 of an inch or 150 thou, if I remember right off the top of my head, of extra area it adds. So if you count that area, you do get yourself, if you go with the most generous readings here, about 2.25 of blast chamber. Though we are quite a bit wider, remember that. We are a much bigger inner diameter because of the welded core construction, and then the fact we're just using the 1735 technically diameter material. So we do have a good bit of additional volume, more than we would have on, say, like a 1.5 tube can, something of that nature. So what else could you guys really want to know? You are going to have to, of course, keep in mind your muzzle device. If you imagine a muzzle device in here with whatever mount you might be using, where it comes into relations of this blast baffle. I would not recommend anything closer than about 1/2 of an inch away from here. That is my personal opinion. So basically, what do we got? The can's going to have ambient air in it before you shoot, and that ambient air, when the first shot comes in, it's going to push into these corners here in this pocket. You're going to get our gas coming down off the faces here. You're also going to have shock waves and things of that nature. And then we're going to have clip gas coming across here as well as through here. And then because of the notches in those cones, we are going to then have some gas enter the annular areas. And depending on the venting scheme on the inside, then vent back into the next cone area. So if we scavenge from here, we eventually vent into here, and we rinse, wash, repeat that process as the charge moves through. Gas is kind of weird though. It expands and it contracts as well. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit of sense. And then of course on our L, the last cone, at least, maybe the last couple cones, do not have that little port in the side here. So the gas is only going to go into this area and circle around and fully pressurize that area and then stop. And then once negative pressure becomes, or I should say lower pressure than what is pressurized in this area happens, well then it will reverse and go back out the way it came in the first place. So that is going to change the back pressure characteristics of the suppressor by adjusting those venting schemes. Adjusting the clips and things of that nature will also play a big part, just like enlarging the bore would, for example, as well. I already touched on the distal, I've touched on the blast chamber. I think I've gone just about as deep as we really need to go. I think you all probably have a pretty good understanding of what is going on now. So this is something I've been working on. I'm not quite ready to fully show it to you guys, but I want to go ahead and kind of touch on it because it does get part of what we're talking about. But we've got Pew Science data, omega metric, and the suppression rating at ear plotted in a logarithmic fashion. I'm studying kind of the results of a lot of different suppressors at the moment, but here you see the Nomad. It's an outlier. So the further right we get, the more back pressure technically is in the suppressor. Okay, and then the higher we get, the quieter that suppressor is. So in theory, we want to be as far left as possible, but as high up as possible, right? So without going into a ton of details, you're going to notice that this is a 10 and this is a 1. 5 would be if this was linear, somewhere about right here, but again, this is logarithmic. But long story short, right here you have the DDC enticer and you've got the Hyperion. You'll notice they're nice and far over to the left. Still pretty far to the right, though, compared to a lot of other cans. But they are also they're actually the highest of every single can tested at EAR 300, or I should say 308 bolt action by Pew. So they are the highest, represented by these numbers here. So you can see they're higher than 51.3, which is the Nomad here. However, they are quite a bit lower in back pressure, as they are further over here to the left. The Nomad has a factor of back pressure almost double what the Hyperion and the Enticer have for roughly the same suppression. Don't get me wrong, they have very similar suppression ratings. Just the Nomad does, at least I should say the Nomad L, the one we're looking at today, does have quite a bit higher omega metric, the back pressure metric. If you want to learn more about that, go see pewscience.com. We're going to be going a lot more into this kind of stuff in the future, but for right now, you guys get the idea. Well, that basically sums up this video. We're going to be shooting this guy this week. We'll be using Reardon Atlas, of course, to keep the data all comparable to everything else we've been shooting over the time. We'll, of course, be going against the LN. That way we can update our ranking charts. That will tell us what it does versus the MAD. We don't have to necessarily shoot the MAD with our ranking system. So we've already just recently shot the MAD. We have fresh MAD versus LN. Now we'll have Nomad versus LN. We'll easily be able to tell, versus the two, how it all does. In other news, before we go, we've got a couple other 4-4s we just got. We got the Rugged Obsidian. We're going to be taking a very, very deep dive on this because, one, it's going to be controversial, and two, I'm highly interested in some of the geometry and stuff with the Obsidian. And then this unsuscepting can or box or fishing tackle, whatever you want to call it, is a Mod 9, which we just got as well, specifically for the channel. And I'll be giving some feedback on that, unvarnished as always. Certainly sure to stir some pots, I would bet. All right, guys, well, thank you for tuning in like usual, and we'll see you on Friday.